So today we will go through how you can install Figaf and get started. And the idea is that we want to see, okay, in 90 minutes, how much are we actually able to install during this time? And I do hope that you, as we go along with this, will ask questions, because that is what this session is about. Since you're live, then might as well do that. But the essential essence is that I just want to see what's going on. So please just say hi. And if you attended the session last or this week, so I have an idea about what you want to know about the Figaf tool before we get started. So yes. So yeah, we want to install Figaf for cloud integration. We'll talk a little about governance. We will skip over that because we covered that Tuesday. And then we'll set it up, configure landscapes, and then we will hopefully get into testing. And that should be possible. And yeah, ask questions along the way. So we should be able to deploy it in your system, and you should have good understanding about what the tool can do. And with that demo, it will be a lot easier for you to convince management to say, okay, this is something we need, and I will do it so you would be able to follow along and see what is going on. And do ask questions as you go along, and give me some thumbs up if you have completed some of the different steps, so we have an idea about where you are at. So obviously we want to cover this thing about we want to automate the transports, make it easier for you to set up everything in that transport process. And yeah, it's document, transport, visual BPM. So there's a lot of features that we want to show up and get you to use. And I think the focus of this is actually more to show you the scope and how difficult it is to get these, or I would say easy it is to get these things done. And so in this we will not be able to cover testing and management of PI CPI, API management, either the processing and what we're able to do with in those scenarios is really the same as you have here. And we'll not cover PI to CPI migrations either. But anyway, that's before you can do that, you anyway need to have the CPI landscape set up, because that's a huge part of that. And then it is a few extra settings to get that running. Need to switch. And yeah, ask questions along the way. And if you're watching this later, yeah, do ask questions. And governance. Why do we want to do governance? And I think this is the part about you. Yeah. Integration is a key part of any ERP or any large organizations. I think a lot of times you would not really do a lot of governance in an SAP PI CPI world, because no one really cares and no one knows that it's actually possible. You would fill in a lot of documents, and this is the part that we want to operationalize to make it possible to actually understand what's going on. There's some different frameworks. I guess anyway, they all covers kind of the same things, like SOX or ITIL, that you want to separate who do develop and who operates, who ensures that things is going on, and that to ensure things are tested. Yeah, integration is important to a company. I guess that. And if you as a developer have too much access, you can impact the company in bad ways. So that's, I guess, why you want to have a better governance and ensuring that you have good practices. And obviously it can both be unintentional or by mistake, or intentional things. But let's get started with installing the tool. So we will do a proof of concept on installing the Figaf tool. Here's some of the things that you would need access to. So we do have an option that runs in BTP Cloud Foundry, but it is one of the things is it takes a little longer to install and get started with. So we will install it on your local PCs, and we'll put a link on how you can actually install it in BTP, and then it is actually just the same. The only thing is that to create the database take like 10 minutes, and that just makes this live install a little too complicated. And I think anyway, installing locally makes it a lot easier for you to manage. And I guess I am out of focus. So yeah, you need the CPI system. Neo Cloud Foundry or a CPI trial is useful, and you would need an S user without universal ID and with admin, developer, and business process expert on the system. And then if we get into the testing, you'd need an API user to trigger tests as you go along. So this is the architecture that we want to get running. Let's see here, a little smaller. We have here the Figaf tool that's being installed. If you do it in Cloud Foundry or any other cloud, you would install it here, connect it to a database. We support Postgres. Okay, good, thanks. And Microsoft Oracle databases as different databases. In this instance, we are just going to run it on your laptop, and that means we would use the built-in H2 database, and it works for something like this, but obviously it's not really production ready, and it is not something that scales to large organizations. But for handling this testing, it is pretty cool. And if you have installed it on your local PC, you can also connect it to your PI system directly, and we can also connect to Git repositories. Cool. Are you with me so far? So let me just copy this link. So this is if you want to install it in BTP, and obviously that is a lot better for setting up scenarios where you need to deploy and you want to use it in your organization. But essentially, you need to download the CF commands. You need to have that in your command prompt. Then there's down here a zip file. You download that, unzip it to a directory, and then there's a vars file that you go in and edit into the name of the tenant you want. You then can run another command here, and then we have created the user roles in your CPI system. And next step is then you can create these, and once the database is completed, you simply just go to and push this into the CPI instance or Cloud Foundry instance, and it will be deployed. And then you can actually log in to the instance using the URL you find here in the app router. And yeah, this is definitely a better way to show what is possible. And yeah, I would definitely encourage you to spend that extra 10 minutes waiting on getting it to run, because you would then also be able to share it with your colleagues as they get along. Good. Yes, I don't know if you have a Figaf license, but otherwise you can go to figaf.com/devops, and then you should receive an email from support. And if not, I think for now I have a number of licenses, so I can give you 4 licenses, and you would just need to use one of these licenses. Let me take the first 4 here. So you can use them instead of the one we provided. Then we can, this is, I guess I just need to make sure that it has line breaks. So yeah, the numbering is not that good. Okay. So yeah. That did not work out well. Okay. Yeah, so you will get these licenses privately if you want to use that. Next up is we go to this page here, and this is the trial download page, and you can go to here. Here you will need to scroll down to this part about downloading this jar file. It's 170 megabytes. And then you should be able to leverage it or download the tool here. We also have a PI agent, but that is only if you want to run testing on a PI scenario. For now, it's not important. So yes, and while that is downloading, you can create a folder on your system, and once it's completely downloaded, you can then move the file in here. Here we have a Java 8 setup that you need to do, and to do that you simply just go in and create a new file, and I think I have one here. So I'd use Notepad++, I save it to this directory. Run.bat. And obviously, if you're creating bat files, etc., sometimes your system can cause some problems and not be able to do it. So the easiest is to go into Notepad or Notepad++, preferable, and save it as BAT file. If not, then you may need to go into and change the setting and change it from text to BAT. And once you have completed downloading of the file, you then move it into the same directory. And you need to adjust the number as the file number. And this is our release. This is 2204, so the April release, patch number 2. That's how you would read it. So you just press save. And now we can run this bat file. And as you can see here, it is then running. Obviously, there's better ways to run it and deploy it than this, but this is the quickest way to get started setting up the tool and running it. And obviously, it can come. Yes, Michael, do send the licenses to each participant. That's probably a better one. And yeah, normally, it takes a minute to get started, depending on your CPU and what kind of resources it has. And then at some point in time, you will get a notification that says application is started. One thing, if you have run Figaf before and have a lot of details in it, you would have a file in your normally Figaf files is placed at users Figaf ERT. Here you can find the database that exists. So if you have existing data, you can go here and you can delete it. So just delete the folder and then install it again. Then you get into a fresh start. And if you have run with some different licenses that has been expired, then that's probably the better way to do that. You may obviously get some different problems once you're running this command. One of them could be that you're missing a Java And if you do that, you just simply go here, specify the path to a Java. We normally just recommend Java 8, and you can also use adapt open JDK. It's an Eclipse project if you do not have an Oracle licensed Java. So that was all you needed to get it started. If you run, and here we have set it up in Windows, it will get the Windows certificate store. That's important if you have private certificate, and mostly I guess this is for PI scenarios. And as we can see, it took like 60 seconds here. It used to be faster, but maybe there's something different that it is trying to set up right now or has been configured. But I think I'm on a clean database, so I guess this should be normal time to set it up. Okay. And I'll always just type in questions. I hope you get to see these things. And okay, so now we got it installed. We hope. What we need to do is we go to the user home here, and here we can log in with a user that's called super user. Password is default. Let me just put that into the chat. That's yeah. I cannot change that. Super user, I guess. Super user and log in. And default. And then it pops up with license not configured. We say no, or go to the license configuration page. And then you can use one of the license that we assigned. And here I'll just select another one. So we will go to license page and load licenses. Now it has been synchronized, and this means that we have connected to the license server and getting the license. So here we can see the expiration date of it, how many objects, etc. is a part of our license and the processing capabilities here. So that was the first part. So now we have the tool successfully running. We can connect to it. We have option here to create users. And normally you would obviously create a user that is called your name. Password. So that's the normal array. You would select that and the number of different rules you would have. I guess normally you would use IoT admin as the general user that you want to use. I do have a slide also on this. So this is users. You would start out with IoT admin, and then end users of the application would have these two licenses. And then one of the things we can also do is we can add in the SAP username that this one user down here, and here we have 4 different monitoring roles. But now I'm just continuing with super user. One thing, if you're just running it locally, just make sure that you're not changing that password, because yeah, it's a little difficult to reset the password if you make changes to it. But obviously, if you want to deploy it in a large organization, have more users on, yeah, that users should not be possible to access or have different passwords. Okay. Questions? Or have you gotten so far? Yet? Okay. Good.
So now we got it. We have the tool running. Next up is we want to connect to some agents, and I have that's the default one. If we just talk about the real life productive case of it, it's either to use Cloud Foundry, and if you use Cloud Foundry, yeah, it's possible to get a Postgres up there. You can also add, and database size is normally less than 1 gigabyte, unless you do really huge scenarios and have a lot of test cases or have a huge set of PI objects or something like that. And normally, if you do, we would recommend Postgres from the cloud provider, because it is they have a pretty good way of running Postgres services and scaling and all these different kind of things that is important in such a scenario. Runtime, we can run it as a Cloud Foundry. We have Linux, Windows VM, and normally we recommend 8 gigabytes for it. It also have a Docker installation, so you can also run it with Docker or Docker Compose as different scenarios. You can run it on either hyperscaler, or if you have a spare server somewhere in the server room, we would need an SSL certificate, and then you can connect it with your identity provider if you have a larger team and want to separate who can log in, etc. But yeah, that's some of the more advanced topics. Okay, so let's connect to a Cloud Foundry system. And the way we do that is we will go to our Cloud Foundry system. Where did I go? Here I have my Cloud Foundry system. And the URL we want to connect with is using this one. No HTTPS. So we will go here and we will say this is our dev. Dev is our CPI system. We will enter the hostname. We would enter our, so this is the hostname we want to have here, and here we would enter our password. And then I need to find that password. And that's, I guess, one of the biggest things. So obviously, as I said, it needs to be a S user. Here. Come on. So let's see if this one is the one I have. SAP. So we'll put it in here. For the iflow map host, we'll need to select this one. For the iflow map host, the best way is to go here. And see the deployed artifacts. So we have the host name here that we can use. This goes up here, and then we need these 2 keys, and for now I don't have those. We can generate them as we get along. But these are only needed if you want to start testing the platform. We want to enable monitoring, and we want to, I think that is all we need now. So we'll save. And what we can then do is we can go here, we can test the configuration. And we have all the access that we need. Let's also add a Cloud Foundry system. Test. Cloud Integration. This is PPR. Oh, wrong one.
And here we can go to the same one. And we will enter the username here, password here, or the system name here, and we can find it. The Iflow map host. This is the one we want to be using here for Cloud for CPI scenario. It's new, and then we can just say save. CPI test, one word. And now we just want to test this one also. So we want to test the configuration here, and it is all okay. So now we have connected. Let me just see if there are any questions along the way. Yes, so what we can do is we can go to the tracked objects. Here we can, let's first take this one because it is smallest. We want to synchronize all packages. And what this will do is it will log onto this CPI system, and then it will start downloading all the different iflows that exist on this specific system. And as you can see here, it's a pretty small one, which make it quite useful for something like this. And the other one, I think we have a lot more stuff going on here, so we can also synchronize that one. And let's see how long time that will take. That will probably take a little longer for it to go through the full initialization of what is going on and finding all iflows. As you can see here, there's quite a number of packages. And one of the reasons is that we are testing a lot of transport. They're going from this system to itself using our virtual landscape setup. So yes, this is likely to take a little while, but I guess we can anyway continue the setup of this. So now we have successfully connected it to both Neo and our Cloud Foundry system, and our trial system. And I think this makes it a lot easier to set up the landscape in a way that ensures that you have the proper access, etc. So what I wanted to do now while this is working, let's see what I've put into the agenda. And yeah. Yeah, so here we can look at how to create the service keys if we want to set these things up, and you obviously would need that for running tests on that given system, and then you just want to insert it there. And here we connect to the Neo system. We can see the different settings that we have configured here and what's going on here. So what we will be able to see here is once we have synchronized it, we have access to a number of different artifacts in here. And we can see modeling, we can see the different objects that exist in our Iflow. So let's go here to our small Cloud Foundry system and check here what's going on. So here I have created an Iflow for the bootcamp here. It's a smaller package. It has a get customer value bootcamp scenario here. It's in draft mode, but let us make a modification to it. Name, and we want to just check this live install. We'll save it as a version and 138 deployed. So now we're deploying it, and I think this one is still running. yeah, so we can see it does take a little while because we have a lot of new iflows, and obviously it's the first time it runs, so it will take a little while for it to do. One thing I'm not sure about is if we can actually also synchronize on this one at the same time. Or if it will need to wait. It can do that. That's nice. So here we can see it takes a lot shorter because there's not much change going on. And we can see we now have 2 revisions of this artifact. And if we open this, so we do have version object here. We can go in here and we can compare it. The BPMN view, we can see what has changed in the BPMN diagram. So notice it was probably a long time since I made modifications to this before. And that could mean there could be some differences in the way that we can see it changed the name here. We changed that to a better name, and we can also see the precise cell that we are making modifications to. We also have some other ones. There's the diff to HTML. That's really useful if you know that there's some code changes that you want to look into. So then you want to use that one. And there's also a message mapping report if you know that there are some mappings that are going on. If we look at the diff to HTML, we can see once we get into the BPMN model, sometimes it becomes really muddy, and that's why we have the graphical comparison of the tooling. Good. So now we have set up the iflow. We can see what's going on here, and we have synchronized a package. And I guess that's also a way you can do it. Just say, okay, I just want to synchronize one specific package, not everything, to see what's going on there. Cool. Now I want to set up the transport. And the reason why we want this is to give you a much better view of what you're transporting. Normally, if you're transporting in a CPI world, you would use SAP Transport Management, and there it is really difficult to see what is actually going on. So someone can actually approve it, but they would not really have a clue about what is going on, and if it is correct thing that they're approving. You cannot do transports or configurations of these artifacts, which makes it also a little difficult to get started with it. And the way it works is we synchronize here, we add it to a ticket, then we can test the change, we can move it into QA, and then we configure it again. We can create a new transport to import it to production. And then once we're done, we can finish the documentation of this. So let's see how that looks. Yeah, landscape in Figaf is a way to show you what is going on in it. It's kind of a linear flow, at least if you're using normal composite landscapes. Then you can set it up and say, okay, we have dev queue production. In some scenario, you can also create branching, but I guess that's a little more complex, and you would need to run it outside of the normal scope here. But obviously, you can have as many as you like as a part of this process. And yeah, once you have created a landscape, it's difficult to make changes to it, so it's easier just to delete it and create it again. I think with the new one, we have some improvements on it, but I think in most cases, you never want to delete it and start over with it. So it's a good thing that you're now using just a trial system to see what is going on here. We do have a concept called virtual agents, and the reason we did this was when you're creating iflows, or when you're developing we saw a lot of customers that only had 2 systems, a development system and a production system. And if they had any problem, then they wanted to transport, and they did copy paste or copy inside of the same system, and that was a bit messy. So instead, just mute this one. we decided to add these pre and post fixes. So when you're creating the landscape, you can set up what pre and post fixes should exist in such a landscape. And yeah, with this new transport process, you have a much better capabilities of defining these things. And yeah, process direct should enable secondary iflows. So if you have iflows in this virtual landscape, process direct should still work. There can obviously be some challenges, for instance, with data store access, etc., that you would need to externalize or have some way of configuring these things. But in general, this is a good way that you can do testing without needing a separate landscape. We have this new concept of calling composite landscape, and here you would define the different systems in the landscape. You give them a name, and then you can define what are the specific criteria for these things. And lastly, you have some landscape rewriting you can do. Okay, let's get started first. So we go back to the Figaf tool. This one is synchronized 5 minutes, so that's pretty good. We go down here to landscapes. Yeah, questions, just put them into the chat. That's what we're here for. Is we have the landscape we can set up here. And what we'll do is we'll create a new landscape. It's in CPI or API management. So API management would work precisely the same way. We will do it from our dev to our dev. And the last one would then be our test system here. So we'll call this dev. QA, and we'll call this last prod. And obviously you can name this as you like, what matches your scenario and landscapes set up. So once you've done that, you will press next, and then you'll actually be able to see what is going on here. So one of the things that the system defines or figures out is that you're actually going from on the same tenant. And because you're doing that, it would need to add prefixes to iflow names, packages, etc. So it would know you need to add these things. You can go in and make modifications to this if you want to do that. Then yeah, it becomes easier to manage if you have your specific scenarios. And one case I was seeing was that they had prepended all the iflows with dev underscore something, dev underscore the iflow name. And with this new functionality, you could remove that and do it automatically, this setup. Yes. And we can see if we go from the queue, it will then remove these objects. So if you add an object, you also need to remove the same object afterwards. And obviously this is special users only that needs to do this. So it's not something that you want to do a lot of times. And generally, we just recommend the default settings. If you have some specific requirements, let's talk about what is needed here. So you will create and configure landscape. And what this will do is it will say, okay, what are the different settings? We will require approvals. It will try to see, based on the iflows you have in development, which of them are in production, and yeah, the different systems. Once you start out, you probably will not see a lot of items, but you can see here we do actually have this object in here in our productive system. Because yeah, in our case, we have been moving a lot of stuff between the different systems, and that just stands some of these things too. Okay, good. So now we've created a landscape that allows us to actually understand these different things. One other thing we do have an option is to rename specific objects. Let's see if it's in here. It is not in this release. I think it will be in the next release. So here we can define these system renaming options. So S4 dev becomes Q4 dev, HANA dev becomes HANA Q, So you can, for each of the different landscapes, set up these search replace criteria, and I think this is mostly for host names that you have, but I guess there could also be specific users that you want to replace on the different systems, so you're ensuring that they're connecting correctly. And there was some different settings previously on the different one, but yeah, you have virtual items, you have deploy and require approval. I think those are also quite interesting. So here we can deploy after transport and require approval. Who can approve it? So we only have one user here. And then how do we set up how to handle the configuration? But I guess let's do it like this. So right now we just have one user on the system. That's okay. And we submit this for approval. So now we have required approval. We'll deploy the iflows after the import has been run. Good. So now we can go to one other thing. I think this is what we have here. To be compliant with SOX, one of the thing is you do not want developers to be able to deploy in production, and to avoid that, we have set up as default you cannot approve your own transport. So even though you're on the list of approvers, they would not be possible to approve. So we just need to go in and switch this approval off, since we only have one user on it. Makes sense. And probably should not have the approval on, but we want to see also the approval, because I think that is an important part about segregating duties. Okay, so now we can configure these things, but I think the most important part is that we go in and create a transport first. So what we'll do is we will go into our tickets. We start from the tracked objects. So here in the tracked object, we have our dev system. We have an iflow. What we can then do is we can assign it to a ticket. First ticket. We can select which landscape it should be a part of, and we would then link it to a Jira ID. We can describe what is going on in this case. So we'll press save. It will request a license. For DevOps, that's okay. Perfect. And now we have created a new transport with the specific object into it. What we can do is we can attach all objects, all dependent objects. So here we will see, okay, we have this iflow, it has a package. In the next release, it will also see, okay, you have script collection and mappings, and then they would be a part of this setup here. If we had created some test cases, we would be able to select these test cases and run them in this scenario. And hopefully we'll get to create some test cases and run them later. What you'll need to do is go to the start and press start. So this will help you set up the transport and approve it. And we can see we're going from the tenant that's called dev, in brackets QA as the label we gave it. And we can see here the configuration that exists in this context. So you see here, okay, we have the object that's HANA dev. We want to translate it in the QA. So we can translate this configuration to something else in our QA system. You can do the same for API keys, etc. In the new one, it would then know that this one is should actually be translated correctly. So you can set all of that translation settings to make some of these things easier. So press save. And now we can go back to the approval phase. So we can send it to approval. send it to approval. And so, didn't I set it to approval? Did I forget to save this? Probably. So, yeah, you need to press save. We can go back to our transport here. So we have the transport out here. And what you will say here is you can see now I can approve it because I got access now. As an approver, I would also have access to do the different differs here. Obviously, we only have it in production. Or we only have it in develop now. If we were making changes, we would actually be able to see what's going on. Good work. Now we have approved this and we can import it on this system. And now it is importing it into the dev system. And if we go onto the Cloud Foundry system here now and take a look at our design time, we can see that it has created I guess it's this one, ZQA Figaf. And here we can see it has added this Iflow into it. And if we go to the deployment mode of this, we can see the Iflow here should be starting. No input yet, so it is starting. And then it should have a QA prefix in the processing. So that means that it looks like a QA interface. Good. Yes, so all transported successfully. So now we have moved it into our QA system, as you saw here, and then it will obviously deploy it, etc. We can roll it back. If we find out that there's a problem on it, then it will roll back that interface, apply the last transport. And once you've done that, it would then be able to create the next, Once you've rolled back, you obviously need to find the solution, create a new transport, and apply it. So once we have tested this and is satisfied with it, we can create a new ticket. This can either be done from here, or you can go back from the object up here. In the tracked object here, we have a tags, and we can select the tags that is source on dev QA. So here we can see the iflows that is a part of this object that is being tracked. So here we can select these two things and we can assign it to the next ticket, or we could just use the tickets we had up here, the transport we had here. And from this one, create the next ticket. So it's a little easier. It knows which landscape is it. There will be some improvements that will remember the different artifacts that you have here. Now we can see it has added the correct objects, the configuration, the package, and we can start the transport. And open the transport. And now let's see if it exists on the system. I guess it does already. So we can see what the differences are here. And I guess we can, that was the package. And this because we have transported between this a lot of number of times, so it has added these different pre and post fixes on here. So the iflow does not exist. And we can import it just as we did with the other scenario. So now we have seen how to install the tool, how to configure it with your CPI systems. We have shown how to create a landscape on these different scenarios. Next up would be testing, but I think before, let's just do monitoring, I think this is also something that is pretty interesting in that terms. So one of the things we do have here is we have an option here to create tiles of different iflows. So we can create it for a period of time, the last week. Options, we can apply filters for specific iflows. And get customer. Select some of these where we have some access on. And if we select this, is okay. What we have now is we can, in our user management, we can give users access to these things. And what we can see here is we have access to this artifact. And in it, we can also see access to persisted messages. So that means it becomes really easy to see what is going on in a given iflow, who owns it, etc. And yeah, you can download persisted messages and view them like anything else, which really simplifies the way you're developing and getting access to these things. So it has persisted messages, MPL attachments as we have here, and then a better way of searching for these attributes. So you can expand here, search for specific iflows or filter in the iflows that you're actually looking at. So there is, yes, we do have custom headers. They're up here. And I think you can also search for these things. So if you put in this value here, you have an option to do searching for the specific custom headers. So we can see that this has these two custom headers configured. So yeah, good. Yeah, so this is looking at the OData view. So this is live data that is visible also with the normal CPI monitor. So once it's deleted from there, we can no longer see it in here. If you want, we also have another one. And here you can create for a given object. Select which iflows it should be fetching, and here you can then pull messages, and this will then take these data and persist it in the Figaf tool to give you a little more insight about what's going on. And I think the reason we are not having the other ones is because that they were test IDs and not specific messages. So we can see here there's some different ones. It has whatever payloads that has been persisted as a part of this in this processing. And obviously depend on what the scope, what you have of capabilities when running these things. I think we have the inbound, we have final message, payload, MPL attachments, etc. We also have a alert notification system, and this is also real helpful for our CPI system. We can then select it and say failed. Here we can say that if the message equals status failed, we will fetch them. And then you start up a scheduler that will fetch these failed messages. And what this will do is once it messages, if it finds a message that fulfills this criteria, it will start downloading it, and it would then put it into the persisted store here. And once you have it from here, you can then define the different rules that need to apply for this. And one of the other things, you could also set the filter to, instead of failed, to have a specific log heading or something like that. So it will show you the different log requests that exist. So we'll see here. So now we already have some alerts.
what we can do is we can go in here, we can see the payload that exists here for this type of request, and we can create a new rule for it. And this will mean that the rules here would run this XPath expression, and then we can write here how to fix the problem and what to do about this this case, save it, and that means each time we're getting this notification, we can send it to specific people that obviously require you to set up the email settings in the application. But then they could get a message about what's going on. An important part here is that we can set it up so it would only notify you or will mute notifications for 60 minutes as you get along. Good. Yes, so, and then at some point in time, you will end up with a number of different rules for these messages, and you can see if something has been applied to the default rule, it's something that you need to go into and figure out how to deal with, and then we can see the different rules that pop up, and these XPaths is then executed one by one, and I think this is an easy way to set up rules to handle specific scenarios. So yes, that's the monitoring capability that we have as a part of this. Good. So now we want to do testing, and the way we're testing is we are looking at iflows and being able to test with them. So if you have a CPI system and a Cloud Foundry, you obviously need to have this API key. In Neo, it's a little easier because you just need to have the user there. So I'll take my get customer. That's the one I normally would be testing on. I will then select record messages here. So we can create more of these things and put them into a test suite. So everything needs to be a part of a test suite for us to handle it. So we can select here, press play, and this will then start the recording. And what this means is that it will switch the iflow into trace mode. And in this trace mode, you will then be able to process messages. So let me show you if I can trigger this iflow. So now I have triggered a message here. I can pull this. And when I press pull here, it will download all of these messages and set them up for us to test. And yeah, this takes a while. I think on Neo, it is a lot faster than Cloud Foundry. I'm not sure if there is something in the APIs that makes it a little difficult or different when we're running these things. So now we have created it, we can create test cases here for it. And we'll just delete the rest here because we do not need to record more messages. So you set it up to start recording, and then it can be processed. So now we have a test case. What if we go into details on this? We can see the different messages that exist for this. We have some inbound and some outbound messages for it. And if we'll just make a modification to one of these things, so view headers here, view header and payload here, we can see the payload. And we can go in here to say live option. So here we can set what is going on, and if we want to make specific test cases or handle things in a little different way, we can set it up this way. We can also go in and create anonymized messages where we can take part of the payload and anonymize it. And then we can actually just run it here.
And with run, it will switch the iflow into trace mode, send messages through this again, call all the same services, and then you'll get a response coming back from it. And yeah, this takes a little while. Yeah, I guess it takes the same 20 seconds to run and fits the data. If we look at the results here, we can see how this is going on. We can, if nothing works, or if you're not seeing any results, go into this message runs here. You can see if the message has been sent, if there are any errors in the sending process of this, and this is important to check out what is going on and who made which changes as a part of this. And then we can look at the errors that we're getting here. And we're getting a lot of errors. Normally I will just go through and take the last one, because here we would have all the different headers in. So we can see here that it gets a number of different headers that we just need to go in and ignore. We have tried to add some of the most common ones, but obviously there can be ones, some that we did not expect. For instance, message expires is because we've called some specific service, and we can see that it is getting 2 different values based on this. So now we have made modifications to how we're comparing the messages, and to go in and ignore it, we simply just say, okay, process the full comparison. And this will then go through all of these 39 messages and figure out, okay, based on this new configurations here about ignoring these 4 criteria, which of them would now be in error. And we see that there's a number of them that are successful, and we would expect that one of them is failed. So we get one here that has an error. We can look at the diff here, and here we can see that we would expect that one of them was called Figaf Live, and instead was called Tom SP. So that is an easy way to see your test, make modifications to it, and be able to run processing correctly. Anonymize specific data if you wanted to. So if we want to, we can go in here and we can actually just say, okay, update, and use this as the new test case. So if you run it again, we would expect that it's called Tom and not the Figaf or Live that we had before. We can go back and go back. Oh, too far away. So there's a number of different, we can look at the test suites that we have for this. And I think sometimes it can be a little challenging to understand what is going on here and find the correct test cases that's going on and being executed. And if we run here, we can also press run here. So a test will exist in a test suite. It can be assigned to multiple different agents where it can run on, and then it can be linked to different test cases. So there's a little bit of complexity in setting up these things and understanding completely how to move these different things. If you're unsure, you can always go to test case runs or test cases and see the details. And here we can see the results of this last one. We can see it's successful, meaning that we are getting the same result after the error has been processed, and we can download a CSV file of these things and compare results, etc. So there's a lot of flexibility and options for comparing this towards the end of the setup. One of the other thing here, I guess we covered a lot of this already. So we travel transports. We also have some APIs to handle these different things, the tickets, and for testing, we have mocking of iflows, and this is really important. If you have scenarios that you cannot call for one reason or another, then this is a good way to call them.
And to enable this, so we have a Figaf package. You need to install that and deploy it. And you find it in the Discover, search for Figaf, then you can install it. So we said we deliver these request reply, setting it up in that way. Fetching or record replay. And we saw here we can consider test cases, parameters should be ignored, etc. And we can run the test cases as either on a individual test case or a global test suite, and we can modify test cases and run it. We have something called shared configuration, and this is if you have different way you want to test an iflow. So normally now we have just seen that you have one way of setting up ignoring parameters and mocking. It would be possible that you say, okay, in some scenarios I just want to test this. In other scenarios I want to test this part of the iflow or with these settings, so these ignoring thing, and then you can use this shared configuration to set it up. We have an API that you can invoke to connect with these things. And then the mocking is really important, and the way it works is that you simply just say select, or in the test configuration say select do not use original iflow, and then you obviously need to set up the cloud connector so it points so it enables CPI to fetch your own system. And once you've done that, you can follow these guides to do that. And if you're running in a BTP, you don't need to do anything with it. So to set this up, you simply just go in here, go into the test configuration. Here we can see we have this do not use mock endpoints or mock endpoints. And if we set this on and go to our test again, run it on our given system. So obviously we've not spent the time on setting up the cloud connector to handle this case. So it would not work, but what we will be able to see in this is that we can see our testing result here. So now we have created a testing result. We can view the result. And one of the things we can now see is that it has created an iflow called Figaf mock. Oh. Let's see if it's the right one. And here we can see that the endpoints here should point to the ERT on-premise solution. If we set up the Cloud Connect ID, they will go in here. If we had, so if you just set an ERT on-premise as the location ID, that should work. And then it would just run. If you have run it in BTP, you don't need to do anything because the BTP is global accessible. And what the Figaf tool will then do is it will just supply these configurations to the user and enable you to set it up there. Obviously go try and see how it works. We covered the monitoring part. Iflows, alerts, restart process, and then I guess if we just wanted to create the last thing I wanted to show off is the ability to, on an agent level, to drop all of this into a Git repository. So we'll go to our GitHub account and here we'll go to here. We will create a new repository. And your repositories, new, we have live,
choose private. Otherwise, you sometimes end up with some strange things. And we can then use this git URL and go to our Figaf tool. We will use the small one because then it's a lot faster. Here we say enable git, update all of these different things, the URL. I think this is okay. Here, tsync. We would use the, and then we need to create a GitHub security credentials, and we will use the settings. In here we can find developer settings, we can find our personal access tokens, and we'll create a new one that has a custom that will expire tomorrow. The name, and it should have the status. We will copy it, and we can then go to our rep here and put this in as the password, press save, and now if we do a synchronization of this agent, so we can see here we created this, and let's see if there's anything into it or if it failed. So we can see here it has populated all of this with correct information that is being changed in our Iflow. If we go back to our bootcamp here, the Iflow we have here, so just wanted to show what was actually be possible for this. And so if we just make a small modification to this, like changing the code here. Save as version. So if we go back to the Figaf tool here and go to our tracked objects again, press synchronize. Oh, that's not the one we want. That's the big one. So we want to do it with the one that is connected to the Git repository. We can press synchronize, just take all packages. And now it's being processed. For handling these things, and it's done. And what we will then see in our Git repository is we got a new commit of this Iflow, and here we can see it's a new version. We made a modification to this specific case. And let me just delete this one. So it was really easy for us to record this, put all of our Iflows into a Git repository that we can then connect. And as you saw here, it comes with a lot of here we come with all these default properties that makes it really simple to set up and run. So the only thing you need to do is copy this one. You need to install Gradle and get that running. I hope this was useful and something that you can see, okay, it's pretty easy to get the Figaf tool running, setting up testing, transport, monitoring, and here we saw it using our on-premise deployment. You could also have used Cloud Foundry and deployed it there. So that was what I wanted to share with you today. Any questions we need to take?